Welcome to the Answers for Elders radio show. Meet the trusted experts who will give you straight answers and will help guide you on the path of later life care. Now, here's your host, founder, caregiver, and CEO, Suzanne Newman.
And welcome back, everyone, to Answers for Elders Radio Network. And we are here with Lori Hudson from HudsonInsuranceSolutions.com. And Lori, we are talking about, on behalf of the Vitality Revolution, intellectual wellness. And I think first and foremost, for us to have intellectual wellness, first has to do with having a healthy brain, a brain that's operating, that's working. Lori, you talk a lot about brain health, and welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much. Good to be back.
It's great to have you back.
So this topic is something that I have talked about through my career with Humana, and Humana puts together presentations for their agents to go out to different communities and senior centers and places like that. So brain health is one that I'll be touching on, kind of the high points of the Humana presentation. And so if anybody wants me to go and do, if it's a local presentation, you can go to my website and put a contact form out, or if you want me to get some information on what we talk about, I can get that to you as well.
So how do you define brain health or healthy brain?
Well, there's different parts of our brain, for sure. But I think in this context of things that we're talking about, I think one of the main things would be what's normal and what's not normal, as far as our state of mind, our memory, things like that, and kind of looking at, because as we do get older, there are some normal declines that we have. So I think part of it is kind of figuring out what's normal aging and what's a concern.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that as we get older. I've even noticed with myself, I have less patience than I used to have. I admit it. I don't have time. I tend to not be as invested in being likable as much as being authentic. So I tend to probably give off the wrong impression, because I don't have the capacity anymore, nor do I want to have the capacity. What do you find? Is that interesting? I mean, is that normal?
You're making me laugh, because you think about these older people that are in their 80s and 90s, and we look at them as kind of cantankerous, but they've really just gotten to that point in life where they just don't give a rip. They're going to say what's on their mind and not really be concerned. So I think that's part of maturity, maybe, being that way, not being so concerned about what people think. But, some of the things, like for me, I cannot multitask like I used to. And I guess, when you talk to brain experts, they say nobody really multitasks anyway. Our brain is just switching around, but I just don't have that capacity. So I have to just really focus on one thing until I see that through, until I get to the next thing. And I used to be able to just jump around. Now it just seems like I'll think of something and 3 seconds later I've forgotten. So I'm constantly just writing things down. More
good for you. You're better than me. I don't write things down.
Oh, I have to.
I should.
So I think that's kind of part of normal aging. And so, when we talk about a healthy brain, again, without going into all that, we don't have enough time here, but when I do my presentations, I go into, the different parts of the brain and how that affects us. But, I think that part of the focus here really is for us to think about what kinds of things we can do to keep our brain as healthy as possible.
So what are the when you talk about brain health, what are some things that people should think about or address when they're talking about brain health?
Well, again, there's a couple different aspects to it. So when you're thinking about what's normal and not normal, I think one thing too to kind of think about our loved ones, kind of look at what's happening around us, because sometimes it can be something that isn't really necessarily brain health. It could be hearing loss.
Mm-hmm.
People that have hearing loss, sometimes we mistake that for their cognitive ability, or that they're slipping, their brains aren't, that it's some kind of dementia or something like that. So
Right.
I think part of that too is, just making sure that we're doing all our routine exams and things like that, and then
Mm-hmm.
paying attention to the people around us. That
Mm-hmm.
if there are some things going on, to really look at what that is,
Mm-hmm.
or what could be causing it. But when I look at my list, things that normal aging would be, just these small declines in memory that we talked about, slower processing speed, that's pretty typical. Reaction time, decreased speed in learning. It might take us a little longer to learn
Mm-hmm.
things. And I talked about it, difficulty doing more than one task at a time, and difficulty ignoring distractions.
Mm-hmm.
So I find that with myself, I have a harder time with that. But abnormal things would be unable to remember recent events. So if you're picking that up, your loved ones too, unable to remember recent events, forgetting how to use common objects. Again, we're looking at dementia. Getting lost in familiar locations, so that could be one. Being unable to follow directions is another. Neglecting safety, hygiene, and nutrition, and decline in the ability to socialize. So this really ties into, so the brain health, that ties into so many different things, which is
Sure.
physical, but then also emotional, spiritual, the whole thing, because if we can't socialize, and again, that decline in socialization could be hearing loss, because that's uh,
Mm-hmm.
an issue with people that.
Sure.
And I
Sure.
was
I
gonna
can
add,
relate to that because I have hearing loss.
yeah,
And I think about all the things I missed before. I was disconnecting from my friends because I couldn't hear the conversation. So I found myself kind of drifting off, and it wasn't an intentional thing. It was just that I couldn't hear all the dynamics. Well, that affects your brain because you're not actively engaging. So I know there's different parts of the brain, and you sent me information. I would really like to just touch on those in the last 5 minutes or so that we have left. Could you kind of share with me a little bit about the different lobes of the brain and what they control?
Okay, so we have our frontal lobe. So that is our thinking, planning, problem solving, reasoning, motor skills. So all those are the frontal lobe.
Mm-hmm.
And the parietal lobe controls, that's our sensory, taste, touch, pain, things like
Mm-hmm.
that. Temporal lobe, that helps with memory and understanding sounds, and that contains our hippocampus. And then the occipital lobe, that receives and interprets information from our retina. So that's our behind the eyes.
Eyesight. Mm-hmm.
And our eyes, the nerve, so that's the only part of our brain that's really on the outside. So your eyes really are
Interesting.
part of your brain. And
Uh-huh.
the brain stem, so that's what is controlling our kind of our involuntary functions, heart rate, breathing, things like that. And then the cerebellum, which controls our balance, posture, and voluntary movements. So when you look at somebody that's had a brain injury, that affects people in different ways, because these
Mm-hmm.
parts of the brain are so much different, their function.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you look at the storage in our brain, is, when you look at these people that are having memory loss, a lot of times they'll remember things that happened in their childhood, but they can't remember 5 minutes ago. And that
Right.
has to do with that part of the brain that stores our short-term memory, is such a small part of the brain.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at your long-term memory, that is stored in the large part of our brains, and then the short-term memory is that
Mm-hmm.
small part of the brain. So
Mm-hmm.
that, why, a lot of times that part starts going sideways for us. And
yeah. So I know that it's important to utilize your brain in different ways and to stretch the brain muscles of your brain to keep it active. And even if you have early stages of dementia and Alzheimer's, on rare situations that can actually be reversed through brain exercising. So what have you worked with seniors that have a bit beginning stages of Alzheimer's dementia, and do you find exercises like that helpful?
I think it is really helpful. And then another thing is that our diet and hydration. So hydration is a big one that I find with a lot of my clients is affecting their brain health, is they're not hydrated because they're worried about incontinence issues.
Yep.
If you aren't drinking enough, or if you're, for these people, if they feel like, okay, I'm going to have to get up and go to the bathroom 5 times during the night, and so they don't want to drink water, that causes UTIs, urinary tract infections, which actually can, it's an infection. So that
and a UTI can also affect dementia and escalate it. So there's such a connection to that piece
and
of
that
it.
hydration that can mimic dementia. So if somebody's really dehydrated, and my mother-in-law, she lived on cigarettes and Coca-Cola, and she had dementia, and I just felt for so long that a lot of her problems were hydration. But then you get to this point with people where they won't listen to you. So I think that the earlier we start on all of this, in our 60s, and just start thinking about, getting in those, again, habits, and making sure that we're hydrating. Our diet can be a factor as well. So if you're eating TV dinners every night, that actually can affect the brain health. And you think about the Mediterranean diet or something like that, where they're eating a lot of oils and fats. Our brain is fat. So if we're not getting those healthy fats, then that can really affect our brain health.
Right. Well, this is a really important information to talk about. And Lori, will you do one more segment with me? And we're going to talk a little bit about how we honor ourselves and how we set forth boundaries to make sure that we're living the truth of who we are. And Lori and we're going to be right back. We at Answers for Elders thank you for listening. Did you know that you can discover hundreds of podcasts in our library on senior care? So visit our website and discover our decision guides that will help you also navigate decision making. Find us at answersforelders.com.